Hello everyone. Thank you for joining the free OpManager training. Before we proceed further, I would like to know if you are able to see the presentation and hear me clearly. Please comment yes on the webinar chat panel to acknowledge it. I will wait for a couple of seconds to get few acknowledgements. I have received few acknowledgements. Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. To start off, let me introduce myself. My name is Sabi, working as a technical consultant on ITOM modules for nearly half a decade. In my experience, I have worked with many enterprise organizations all over the globe in solving their network and infrastructure related issues, suggesting and deploying products that meet their network monitoring requirements. I simply make the network administrator's life easier. About today's training, OpManager online webinar is divided into 4 parts. Today I'm glad to host the first part of OpManager webinar. We will discuss on ways of adding devices and discovering the devices in OpManager. The second part is on April 10th. It's about observing and analyzing the key performance metrics of the devices in OpManager. The third part is about keeping an eye on the network performance metrics and mapping functionalities available in OpManager, which is scheduled on April 17th. And finally, the fourth part is scheduled on April 24th. It is all about fault management and self-executing functionalities available on OpManager. The training will be hosted on a couple of time zones, which is 6:30 a.m. GMT and 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Please use the link that you see on the bottom of the screen to register for the next schedule and grab your seats. The presentation will be sent to you via email in next 24 hours, and the webinar will be uploaded on our YouTube channel called OpManager Tech Videos. You may use the video for future references or even share it to your peers who missed to attend the webinar. I would like to take this moment to thank the attendees who have joined the webinar despite of your busy schedules. I'm really overwhelmed by the huge response of the webinar. On the course of this session, if you have any queries, please type it on the chat panel. I have experienced panelists besides me who are eagerly waiting to address it. So please pose a lot of questions and keep them busy. Today's heading is Discovery and Classification. We will be discussing on how the devices can be discovered in OpManager, what are the ways, and how do we classify them according to the type, vendor, protocol, and more. Today's agenda would be prerequisite for installing OpManager. I will be focusing on the essentials for installation and what are the ports that the OpManager uses while communicating with the devices. Understanding network infrastructure, we will discuss on why we need to understand the network infrastructure for monitoring it. What are the challenges involved in it when discovering the hybrid infrastructure? And third, the challenges faced in device discovery process. We will discuss on the multiple ways of discovering the devices and the challenges involved in it. And then 5 important steps to simplify the discovery process. I will walk you through the techniques and tricks on discovery process using OpManager UI. And I will also be using the product UI for the same. And finally, the real life use cases, where I will discuss on the real life use cases where OpManager played a major role in helping major network engineers problem. Prerequisites for installing OpManager. OpManager is a simple network monitoring on-premise solution. It helps you to monitor the health, performance, and availability of any networking devices. The application is available for both Windows and Linux-based operating systems. Anyhow, installing OpManager on a Linux operating system has a negligible limitation. That is, you may not be able to monitor the Windows-based devices or any type of devices that is using WMA protocol because the Linux operating system does not have the feasibility of it. But still, we can monitor the same devices using the SNMP protocol. Since OpManager is an on-premise solution, the application is bundled with Postgres as the default database. It also has a feasibility of working with Microsoft database as well, but it is not bundled along with the application. For the network that has up to 500 devices, what you see are the system requirements. We might need a Linux or Windows operating system. It could be a physical machine, virtual machine, and that has to be an 8 gig of RAM and quad-core processor or higher, and with at least 40 gigs of hard disk space. The total number of devices that needs to be monitored in OpManager has a direct impact on the system requirement. So, system requirement varies accordingly. The link on the bottom of the screen will give you a brief idea about the system requirement for different scales of the network. Now about the ports and the protocol that is used by OpManager. OpManager is purely an agentless monitoring solution. Instead, we monitor the devices using protocols. These are the list of protocols that is used for communicating and fetching the data to measure the health, performance, and availability of those devices. OpManager primarily uses SNMP protocol for monitoring the various aspects of the devices. So we need UDP port number 161 for sending and receiving the SNMP request. You can also forward SNMP traps to OpManager server for converting them into alarms. So we use SNMP trap port 162. WMA protocol is used for monitoring the various aspects for Windows devices like Windows services, event logs, process monitors, and more. CLI-based protocols, Telnet and SSH are used for monitoring the Linux-based devices, so port number 23 and 22 has to be enabled for it. Availability, response time, and packet loss is measured using ICMP and TCP protocol. Since OpManager is a web-based protocol, web-based product that runs on all browsers, to access the GUI, port number 8060 for HTTP, and for secured connection, we use port number 443. This is all about the system requirements, ports for installing and running OpManager. Moving on, we are going to talk about understanding the network infrastructure. We have to admit the fact that network is continuously evolving and each network is unique. While consulting, we come across many types of networks, mostly complex. These networks are designed to meet the ends of an organization. To monitor a network, we need to understand how the network is configured. Let's see with an example. Let's assume this is an infrastructure of a Zoho Corporation. So Zoho Corporation is a large enterprise with 5 blocks. It includes 1 headquarters and other 4 are sub-blocks. Checkup is the central IT manager, and each block has dedicated IT administrator to maintain their networks. And this is a network diagram of a central IT building. It has 75 network devices and 25 SQL servers and 10 Exchange servers and so on. Jacob decides to introduce a monitoring solution. Of course, it's going to be OpManager. So he installs it in the central headquarters to monitor all the devices across all the branches. Now let's see what are the challenges that he might face in adding the devices. Preparing for network discovery. As I told you earlier, Zoho Corporation has dedicated network admins to manage each blocks. So he had to create user accounts in OpManager to keep track of all the user activities, whatever they are adding, removing, modifying, and so on. Reachability. Since he needs to monitor the devices in all the 5 blocks, he had to ensure that all the devices are reachable from OpManager server itself. And finally, the credential profile. Since OpManager is agentless, and as I told you earlier, we use protocols like SNMP, WMA, and so on, we need to get SNMP and other protocol information and create a credential profile in OpManager for monitoring the same. Network admins have the common practice of maintaining the network information in a CSV file. It would be easy for them if they just upload the CSV file in OpManager. Anyhow, there's challenges involved in it. Sometimes it might not be necessary to discover all the devices in the CSV file. For instance, some might not need to monitor the desktops in their network. If we don't remove the desktop entries in the CSV file, it might increase unnecessary load in OpManager. Also, each desktop will consume 1 OpManager license. because OpManager is purely device-based license. So every device is accountable for one device license in OpManager. And other challenges. So the challenges involved in post-discovery actions. So let's say that Jacob has successfully discovered all the devices in OpManager, and OpManager monitors all of them. And now, what are the challenges he might face after discovering it? Say, for instance, Jacob has added 25 SQL servers. So his first task is, whenever a SQL server in future is added, a SQL Server monitor has to be associated to it. Say, for instance, a set of services, process, and applications has to be monitored explicitly on those servers. Now he needs to add a group, the SQL Server based on application or location, so that he can easily differentiate them. Also, in future, whenever a SQL Server is added, he should be able to associate it to a certain group. And also, he might have to associate an email notification whenever a SQL service goes down. So this is a second set of challenges after discovering the devices. Previously, we saw the challenges involved in before discovering the devices. Finally, the third set of challenges you might face, interface discovery. Jacob doesn't need to monitor all the interfaces in the devices. He is more concerned about the Ethernet interface card. So showing all the interfaces and monitoring all the traffic through each interface is unnecessary and overloaded to OpManager. And it's a lot of information. So how are we going to overcome that with the help of OpManager? These are some of the challenges in automating the device discovery process. The network is always evolving. Now, the network might have a few hundreds of devices, but in the near future, it might increase to a few thousands. So manually adding the new devices again for monitoring is not so efficient. Discovery process needs to be automated so that OpManager itself adds the new devices for monitoring without any human intervention. OpManager should periodically scan the network and add all the devices that are newly introduced in the network that are not available on OpManager already. And we have to ensure that all the devices are successfully added. We should take a quick report. So Jacob might also need a report to keep track of the total number of devices added so that he can manage the licenses and get information on who added the device and what are the devices annually added. So these are some of the challenges that Jacob might face before, after, and automating the task. So the 5 simple steps to simplify all the challenges in discovering the process in OpManager. So we can see that with the help of the product UI. Now let's see how OpManager simplifies these 5 challenges and automates it. Now let me get back to the product UI. So what you're seeing here is the home UI or the product homepage of OpManager. So for the demo, I'm currently using OpManager Essential Edition, which has build number 12.3.326. This is a home UI where you have the feasibility of customizing the dashboards to have a quick view of the device status. Now, regarding our challenges in the discovering the devices, the first challenge is to create user accounts to his network admins. To create a user account, you should navigate to Settings, Basic Settings, and User Management. So this is a page where you have the feasibility of adding a lot of users in the network. Now click Add User to create a new user. So here you have the feasibility of assigning the role. Since I'm going to create an administrative users for each block, so I'm going to assign them the role as administrator. So if you have any sub network admins, you could create an user account for operator where he will have restricted actions over OpManager. So you also have the feasibility of authentication. We have multiple ways of authenticating the users. We can either use the local user or radius or even the server AD server user authentication. You can also import users from the AD server as well. Now to keep it simple, I'm going to choose local authentication. I'm going to type the username and here goes the phone number, the mobile number, finally the password. Here you have the feasibility of configuring the password policy fields like what is the minimum length, what should be the minimum length of a password, and should the password complexity be simple or it should be too much of complex. So you have the feasibility of defining the password policies as well. So let me just define the username and the password. Let me retype it. So once you retype the password, you have to define the email address as well, so that it will help you to recover the password on whenever you forget the password. And I'm going to hit next. Scope. So now here I have the feasibility of selecting the devices. So let's say Jacob's entire organization has 5 blocks, and each block has a dedicated network admin. So the dedicated network admin should have the visibility for the devices in his branch and not the others. So this can be sorted out with the help of the scope and visibility. So I can select either by devices, or I can simply group those devices using a concept called business view and simply associate it to them. So once I hit save, the user will be created and it will be listed on over here. As I told you earlier, you can use the radio server setting and AD authentication for inputting all the users. Now that the users are created, so whenever he tries to access OpManager, he has to enter the username and the password that we just entered and log into it. Now the second challenge that we were talking about. So the second challenge is to check the devices are reachable from OpManager server or not. To check whether the devices are reachable from OpManager server or not, we can do it via command prompt from OpManager server, or else we even have tools for the same. To do that, you can navigate to settings, tools, and ping tools, where you just have to enter the IP address of the host name so that it will just let you know the result of the availability and reachability of the device. And the third challenge is to configure credential profile. To mention again, OpManager is agentless, and we should define the protocol information like the username for WMI and the SNMP community string for V1 and V2. To do that, you have to navigate to settings, discovery credential, and add credential. These are the list of credentials and protocols that OpManager supports for monitoring the devices. It supports all the 3 versions of SNMP, Telnet, or SSH, WMI, and VMware credentials for the virtualized environments. Username and password of UCS and CERN servers to monitor the various parameters of the same. Now let me create a WMI credential and a SNMP credential for you. So I'm going to enter this is a name for the credential WMI credential profile, and I'm going to enter the domain name, my name, as well as the password. So once I retype the password and hit save, the credential will be saved over here and will be listed down. Similarly, you have to do the same for SNMP. So as I told you earlier, we do support all the 3 versions of SNMP. To create a community string, you just have to define the profile name and the read community, as well as the write community. And write community is optional, and you have to define the read community mandatorily. So you can define the SNMP port as 161. If you want to make any changes to it, you can certainly do, as well as you can modify the SNMP tryout and the SNMP retries. Once they are saved, they will be listed down over here. So we have created the users, checked the devices are reachable or not, and now define the credential profiles. The third step is to discover the devices. OpManager has multiple ways of discovering the devices. If you want to add a single device using its IP address or DNS name or device name, use the instant device add device account. So you just enter the information IP address or device name over here, select the community string. The community string or the WMI credential that I have just created are listed down over here. So I can select whatever I want and discover. So instantly the device will be added in OpManager. Besides that, you also have the feasibility of discovering the devices using a discovery profile. So under the discovery profile, we have IP range, CIDR, and CSV file. Now the Jacob's requirement is to discover the devices using a CSV mechanism, because as we told earlier, he has a list of all the devices in the CSV file. So let me quickly click on the CSV file, and now I have to browse it. So CSV file has a specific version. So I have already opened the CSV file specific version over here. So the first row should represent the header followed by the values. It has the list of all the devices in Jacob's network, but Jacob doesn't want to monitor all the devices because desktops has the least priority. So out of the list that we are seeing here, we have to eradicate the desktops and monitor other network devices. So now simply let me import the CSV file. So the CSV file is added. So I have to define the device name. I have to define the rows over here, the columns over here. So I'm going to select device name, display name, and the device type. So once I hit OK, the columns will be associated. So as I told you earlier, his requirement is not to monitor all the devices because he has to eradicate the desktops. So here in OpManager, we have the discovery filter where I can simply ignore the devices by using IP range, IP address, or category. So I'll just use the category and enter the value as desktop or any other category you want to choose. And once I hit add, OpManager will, when reading all the entries in the CSV file, it will simply ignore the desktops and read all the other networking devices. So this is the fourth challenge of Jacob, which has already been met with the discovery filter. Now I have to hit next and select the credentials. So here all the credential profiles that you have created are listed down. So here you can choose what are the credential profiles that are more mandatory, or you can simply select all the credentials if you're not sure what are the credentials that are used for discovering the devices. And then I'm going to hit next. Now, Jacob's post-discovery process or post-discovery challenges. So the post-discovery challenges of associating certain services or a notification profile or grouping the devices together can be handled with the help of rule engine. This rule engine is a feature that can help you to automate certain tasks or while discovering the devices itself. So where you have to define the rules. Now let's take our use case as an example. I have to associate a process service monitors and associate it to a group, then associate an email notification profile as well. I can define all these tasks here for once, so they will be applied for all the devices. I don't have to do it for one by one. So to create a rule, I will just simply add a rule, define the correct name for a rule. Now for my criteria or for my use case, the criteria would be the DNS name. So I would define the DNS name, which contains a keyword called MS SQL. So it will filter out all the devices name that has certain MS SQL over here. Now, what are the actions that I have to make? So some of the actions are I have to associate a service monitor to it. So I will simply associate this DNS service monitor to it. And similarly, I will add another notification profile. So Jacob wants to associate a notification profile so that he wants to get notified via email whenever MS SQL server goes down. So it's already been done. Similarly, I can associate the processes or anything that I would like to. And finally, the grouping aspect. So I can simply group the devices in this business view so that you can simply click on the business view so that all the MS SQL servers on that certain location will be listed down. So this is how I simply create a rule so that the post-discovery challenges are no more with the help of rule engine. So now I hit next. And the fifth challenge of interface monitoring. So now Jacob doesn't want to monitor all the interfaces. He was more specific about Ethernet interfaces. So, and about what is the up and down status. He's not bothered about the rest of the same. So to do that, I will simply enable it. And instead of selecting all, I will simply select Ethernet. So what is the status that he's more focused on? He wants to get notified whenever the admin status goes up or down and the operation status is up or down. I will simply remove all the other statuses as well. So OpManager will notify me or monitor me whenever this action happens. And then let me hit next. Checkup wants this discovery to happen right away. So I will not make any changes here. So let it be execute now. And here you can define the name for the profile as well. And you can even define the email address so that you will get information about the discovery process. And when you hit next, so this is the information. You will get the information of the profile name, what is the input, what is the mechanism, and what are the credential profile you're using, and what are the rules. And finally, when I hit execute now, OpManager will simply trigger the notification, the discovery profile that you have created, and everything will be listed down under the inventory over here, just like this. And here, the devices that you just discovered will be sorted according to the category, the type, the vendor, the applications, and the protocol that you're monitoring. This is how Jacob's requirement can be met. And even we can automate the discovery profile as well. So let's say that my requirement is to add all the devices which falls within a certain network or a certain IP range without any human intervention. To do that, instead of CSV, I would simply choose the IP range where I would give the range of my network. To 255. And similarly, I'll be keep on adding my likewise, I can simply go on adding what are the networks I want to monitor. So if you have a huge network and if you're not sure how many devices are going to add, just define all the network IP range over here, hit next, select all, and schedule it. Finally, you have the feasibility of scheduling it. Let me quickly show the possibility of, let me skip the rule engine and the discovery. Yeah, there you go. You have the feasibility of scheduling it via monthly, weekly, yearly, or so, at whatsoever. And you will also get notified and get a quick report. Finally, Jacob wants to see the reports. So what are the devices are added every time and how many were deleted, how many were unmanaged. So that report information will be gathered over here. You'll get information about the source, the user that triggered the notification profile, and how many devices were added, deleted, and finally modified. You'll get that information over here. So this is how simply I can automate Jacob's all challenges, pre, post, and interface related challenges with the help of OpManager. With few clicks, it's just a cakewalk. Now let me go back to the slides and drill down what's coming further. Real life use cases. So we have certainly some interesting real life use cases that we have got from our most valuable customers, that how OpManager helped them in tedious times to make their life easier. The first use case, automating device addition by receiving SNMP trap messages in OpManager. So there was this one end user who wants to add devices in OpManager automatically. So let's see what are the ways of achieving it. So as we just discussed earlier, one of the interesting ways is simply using the discovery profile and IP range mechanism. If you're not sure about what IP range does the new device might follow, you can simply discover all the devices. Likewise, you can keep on adding all the IP ranges so that OpManager will simply add all of them. And there is another option. So there is another use case where the devices has to be discovered via SNMP traps. So the end user's requirement is to monitor all the new devices that are added in their network or organization. And this time they're not sure what is the IP range that they are going to assign for each device. It is so random. So even they are not sure about the IP range or the IP address of a device or the subnet information. On that case, we suggested them a solution of monitoring or discovering the devices using the SNMP traps. So whenever a new device is added, we requested them to configure SNMP traps from the device. So if you configure the SNMP traps from the device to the destination server as OpManager IP address, whenever we receive the trap, we simply add them in OpManager. They will be listed down in inventory and they will simply monitor it just like any other normal device. To do that, you have to navigate to Settings, Discovery, and Discovery Settings. So here you have the feasibility of instructing OpManager to discover the devices via traps. All you have to do is configure the traps so that the devices are monitored automatically without any human intervention. Yeah, the second requirement, monitoring the network topology of a building. Let's take Jacob's requirement again. One of his network administrator of a branch doesn't have information about his devices in his network in an IP address or IP range. He says that he simply has a seed router or core router's IP address. So in that case, is there a way to discover all of them with just the seed router information? Yes, we do have that possibility. So we have a concept called layer 2 mapping technology, where you simply have to discover the seed router with it. So all you have to do is you have to go to Settings, Discovery, and Layer 2 Discovery. So here we requested them to enter the IP address of the seed router or core router, and requested them to define the IP range. So they weren't sure about the IP address of the devices that they are connected to. So we requested them to enter a simple range of multiple ranges of IP address so that we can discover all of them. And the SNMP community string, of course. So the profile for them was created already. So the SNMP profile was created already. We have to simply click it. And here you have the feasibility of scheduling it and discovering the mechanisms. So once you hit discover, OpManager will discover all the devices that are connected to the seed router with just the IP address of the seed router. So it would simply turn out a map like this. So actually layer 2 mapping is a topology map by OpManager. This is layer 2 and layer 3 topology map by OpManager, which gives you an pictorial representation of how your network is configured. What are the devices are there? What are the types of devices, its category, and the connectivity. On what interface are they being connected? So you can simply use this as a reference to get an information of how your network is configured. Besides this is not Jacob's requirement. We are not done with Jacob's requirement. He wants to add all these devices in OpManager for monitoring it. So first step, we have successfully discovered or got the information of all the devices that are connected to the seed router, which has the seed router IP address. Now, all I have to do is simply say input device. So when I say input device, it will list me down all the IP address of the devices that was just discovered, and I select all and say discover. When I do this, OpManager will reach out all the devices and measure the ping, availability, packet loss responsibility, and also monitor various aspects like CPU, memory, and the rest of them. So it simply adds all the devices and lists down in the inventory of the device, inventory of OpManager. Sorry about that. The third use case, adding devices from ServiceNow to OpManager. So every network has a remedy tool like BMC software, HP, or ServiceNow. So, and they do maintain a lot of asset information in the ticketing tool. So now, is there a way to discover all the devices or information from them, so let's say ServiceNow or BMC software, into OpManager using an API? So we do have them. We use a concept called REST API, where you have to generate the REST API key from OpManager. To generate a REST API key, you have to navigate to Settings, Basic Setting, REST API. So here, the REST API key will be highlighted. You can enable it and say regenerate API key. So the API key will be generated. You have to gather that information and create a script for that. So this is a BMC remedy tool information where it lists down all the devices or the devices information in the BMC remedy tool and using this script. So this is a simple script that we use in OpManager for discovering all the devices that are in the BMC remedy tool. So the API key that we have generated goes down over here, and we have instructed the information about the text file over here, and of course the IP address and the port number where we should access it. With this script, we simply run them so that OpManager reaches out to them, gets the information, and adds all the devices in the text file in OpManager without any much of human intervention. So yes, we do can import the devices from BMC Remedy Tool, ServiceNow, or HP. And also to get an information about the API keys, we have listed down all the API keys and the purpose and all the modules that we use and what is a method in our help document. So you can simply navigate to manage help.opmanager and opmanager REST API column to get information about what is the purpose of API key, what is the information that you get, and what is the method that we use. The fourth use case, updating interface device properties with discovery schedule. Network, as we discussed earlier, network is so dynamic, so as the devices in the network as well. So we cannot get information of, or we cannot expect the properties of a device to be static all the time. They might be dynamic. You might be increasing RAM size of a device, decreasing the RAM size of a device, or an IP address of a device could be changed, and so as the interface as well. You can increase or decrease the interface speed, check the admin or operation status, permission, and a lot of things. Since the changes are so dynamic, can OpManager accommodate everything or update itself with the latest information? Yes, we do have an option for that. So the same page discovery, where we have to simply use the existing discovery mechanism. So every now and then you can define you can rediscover the devices simply. So I can select the devices by its IP address or by business view or by category. So I would simply select, I want to select all the category of devices. I'm going to rediscover the existing devices. Hit next, define the protocols for monitoring them, the rule engine if you want, and finally schedule it. So whenever the schedule runs, all the devices will be rediscovered and the latest information will be updated in OpManager. So this is how we overcame the dynamic information update on the properties of the devices and interfaces. Unknown. For those who have used OpManager, unknown, or those who haven't used OpManager, unknown is a term that you might see in OpManager UI sometimes or in rare occasions. When you add a device in OpManager, for various reasons, the device will be categorized as unknown. So let's see what is a possibility of a device could be in an unknown category. It's so obvious that a device will not be in an unknown category. Some of the possibilities are port issue. So OpManager uses port, protocol, and others for monitoring the information and fetching those. So let's say you're monitoring a device using SNMP. So it uses SNMP protocol and port number 161. So your physical firewall or your Windows firewall where you have installed OpManager could be blocking the specified port number. On this case, OpManager will not be able to reach the device and get those information. So on that case, OpManager will term the device as unknown. So this is one of the possibility. And the second possibility is password issue. And every network nowadays are so security concerned, so they are more bothered about the username and the password and the credential profile. Say they do change it every 30 days to be precise. So we should check or update OpManager with the latest password information. So all the credential profile that you have created as static will not be changed ever. So we have to add a lot more credential profile or edit the existing credential profile whenever a new password gets updated in the network. In the recent release, we have introduced this feature called test credential, where you have the feasibility of scheduling a test to check all the devices are correctly associated to the profile, a credential profile or not. whether they are passing or not passing. So I will simply select all the devices, hit next, and I would simply schedule it. So as since it's 30 days, I would just select 30 days, and if I want to get email, I'll just define the email address, and I even can generate an alarm for the same. So whenever I do this, OpManager will check the credential profile for all the devices that I have selected and will give me a complete report whether the test was passed or not. And finally, the third possibility is device templates. OpManager uses a concept called device templates. So we do refer OpManager as a complete vendor independent and device independent monitoring solution because of this device template concept. So in OpManager, we have around 8,000 device templates. So each device template represents a type of device in the market. So it has a lot of information about the device identifier, the vendor name, and the category, and what are the monitors that we are planning to monitor on the device. On some, we do update this device template whenever we release a PPM, and if there is any new device launch, we do update our device template as well. So if you discover or add a device in OpManager, which is recently launched, which is very new, and if the device template is not available, it will be in the category of unknown because OpManager doesn't know which device template to associate it with. On that case, OpManager simply associates or defines the device as unknown. To overcome this, you have the feasibility of creating a device template where you have to define the vendor name, what type of device is it. So let's say I start my own company and create a device called Savvy Switch, and I'm going to define a vendor name for it. I have to create a new vendor. So I simply add it, and then I select a category that is going to be switch and query the device for device identifier and hit save. So from then, whenever you add a device, let's say a switch from Savvy organization, it will be termed as Savvy Switch, and the vendor is Savvy and Switch. All the monitors will be associated with it. So it is so simple to create a device template and monitor all those information. So this is all about discovery and classification. Now I'm very excited to announce that Manage Engines User Conference is held on April 24th, Wednesday to April 26th, Friday at Sheraton Dallas Hotel, USA. So it's a 3-day event with remarkable information about the industry standards, new features rolled out, and what are we cooking to deliver for our customers and prospects. You will also have live demos of our prospects and complete one-on-one sessions to give you a personalized attention about your queries of all the products under a roof Manage Engine. Please register using the link that you see on the screen and grab your seats for 3 days of technical carnival. There you go, Dallas. Here we come. Summary. So let's have a quick walkthrough on all the topics that we discussed for an hour. So today we discussed on the characteristics of OpManager along with the prerequisites of installing it, and what is the discovery mechanism, the types of discovery process, and automation available on it. Now, questions. So I believe you must be having a lot of questions. So we have a technical experienced expert, Mr. Shrikant, to address all your questions. So he will be taking over to the same. Before I sign off, I would like to thank everyone who attended this presentation patiently. I hope we have added a lot of value to it, and I really appreciate it. Until next time, thank you. Bye-bye. Let me put on to Mr. Shrikant.
Thank you, Sari. Hello, everyone. My name is Shrikant, and I'm one of the product experts from the OpManager and the panelist for today's webinar. I hope the session was informative, and we can see we have received few interesting questions from our attendees. So we shall be able to discuss all of them here now. So let's get started with our first question. What happens to the devices that are not reachable during the network scan? So whenever a device is added into the OpManager, in such scenarios, if the device is not reachable from the application, it will be placed under a new state known as device not monitored state. So whenever the device is not reachable, it will be placed under a device not monitored state, and once it's accessible, you can perform a rediscovery or an update status to fetch the device back and make it available for monitoring. So with this, we'll move on to our next question. Can can a device be added just for the availability to ping the test without SNMP or WMI? I have vendor devices on my network that I do not have SNMP or WMI on, and I just need to ping these devices. Yes, absolutely, you can add the devices only for monitoring the availability, but the device will be placed under an unknown category. For example, let's take one example. Let's go to the inventory, click on add, just give a random IP address, test IP address, and without using any credentials, we can use it to discover. So in that scenarios, the device will be added here under the inventory page. For example, take this unknown device. It will be like under the unknown state, and if you want to just manage it and edit the device details to respective configurations, such as whether it's a router or a switch, you can choose the vendor and configure the details and save it. So this will just monitor the availability of the device and making it not able to pull other performance parameters because other parameters require SNMP and WMI protocol. So the third question we have is, after adding the devices, will there be any impact if I remove the discovery profile? After adding the device, you won't be having any problem with the removal of the discovery profile. However, if you have scheduled it for an alternate discovery of those particular discovery process, that process might not happen because you have removed the discovery profile. So the next question we have is, can you hide devices that are no longer in service without deleting them? Unfortunately, we won't be able to hide the devices that in OpManager, but in case if you think that they are consuming the license, you can simply go to the inventory page, select the list of devices that you would like to unmanage it, and place them under unmanaged state so that no monitoring will happen, as well as they will not also consume any licensing count. With this, we'll move on to our next question. Are there any audit reports per device? We do not have specific reports for audits as per a device specific, but however, we can do a filter of a report which is available under reports, system reports. Under the system reports, we do have audit report, which can be filtered based on the devices. And you can just choose the devices for which you would like to view the audit, and it will become a device specific audit report. So next question for us to discuss is, when discovering interfaces, is there a limit on the license? So as far as the licensing part of the OpManager is concerned, the licensing OpManager is based on the number of devices, that is the IP addresses that you are trying to monitor. So In such scenarios, you can discover unlimited interfaces for a respective device, and there is no limitation for interfaces being monitored in OpManager. The next question we have is, how can I turn off the VMware vCenter auto discovery? We have a lab environment which has over 500 VMs we do not want to monitor. So in order to stop the auto discovery, you need to go to the settings. Under the settings, credentials, which is available under discovery module. Where you can see the VMware credential that is being used for discovery of the vCenter of the ESX host. Click on the respective credential. There will be a checkbox for disabling the auto VM discovery. You can disable the auto VM discovery and save the configuration. This will stop the auto discovery for all the ESX hosts and the vCenters for which this particular credential is being used. The next question we have is, how can I avoid device duplication during discovery? For example, I have a router configured with two virtual IPs. This gets added as three separate devices when added in OpManager, one with physical IP and two devices with virtual IP. For handling this kind of scenarios, we do have an option. For enabling that option, you need to go to the settings, discovery settings available under discovery. There's an option to have unique system display name. So what this option will do is it will try to perform like add the device using the host name of the device instead of the multiple IPs that is being connected to it. So this will not add multiple devices if the device has three IPs, that is one physical and two virtual. It will instead add the device by using the host name for it, because the host name will be one even though the particular device might be having three or four IPs. The last question we have is, how can I ping an entire subnet without performing a discovery? Under the discovery module, we do have an option of trying to ping a respective device when you provide one single IP. But in scenarios of trying to check the availability of the devices, multiple devices available under a particular subnet, we do have certain tools to check that. In order to view the ping status, you can need to go to the tools. Under the tools, we have network monitoring tool, where we have this network scanner. Clicking on add IP will request you for the start IP address and the end IP address, where you can provide the subnet detail and click on add. This will fetch the availability status. You can view the ping status here and decide which devices are available and which are not. And this mechanism will same be replicated on the device discovery when you try to discover a particular subnet. So you will be aware of what are the devices available and what are the devices are not available, which will be placed under device not monitored state. So those are the questions we had to discuss with you. I hope the session was informative, and in case if you missed any part of the webinar session, we'll be uploading the same on our YouTube web channel. And the second one is the help.opmanager link, which will take you to the help document available for OpManager. And we do have technical community where you can post your questions and our technical product experts will be able to answer your questions. And you can reach OpManager support using the email address for any technical assistance or queries. And this will be the direct dial number, and you can reach us over the phone. The next training schedule on monitoring server performance is scheduled on 11:30 a.m. EST on 10th April. So I request everyone to attend the respective training session to know more further about the monitoring server performance. Thank you so much for your wonderful time. Have a great day. Bye bye.